Are we having fun? Do we need to have a kumbaya moment for the office? A little bit out? No. Hi, everybody. My name is Douglas Welton. Today we're going to talk about software internationalization, as if that weren't a mouthful. Here's contact info for me if you need to, if I say something you want to talk to me about it later, stuff like that. Just drop me an email, or if you want to do some of that other social stuff, check me out on About Me, and we'll go from there. How many people in this room have made software that is delivered in multiple regions and multiple languages around the world? A couple, 3, 4, 5 hands. How many people are on a project that they think might go that way anytime soon? Okay. I used to work for a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, which is a long time ago. But I remember coming in, and they had a very structured process for delivering software internationally. This is where I got this exposure, and this is a long time ago. But it was kind of nifty because the product that everything that we did was delivered in 17 different languages. So it wasn't just one. You had to get it more or less right. And that's not to say that everybody gets it right or anybody gets it right. But we'll talk about a little bit about that today. We're going to talk about a few things, why somebody would want to internationalize their software, what that really means. We'll talk about some design strategies and tactics. There are numerous, an infinite amount of different things that you can do, but we'll talk about some of them, some of the cultural issues that you're going to run into, and stuff like that. And then we'll kind of wrap it up. To get things started, by the way, if I say something goofy, just stop me at any point in time and ask me a question. Let me ask you a pretty simple question. What year is it? I got a 2013. Don't. It depends on which calendar you're using. But how many people thought of that? It's Mark, right? How many people thought of that before Mark asked to put that in the water? All right? Because got one over there. Depending on what calendar you're using. So, let's see. The Islamic calendar is 1434. Hebrew calendar 5773. I love this one down at the bottom, the Discordians. I have no earthly idea who these people are, what they believe, or anything of that nature. But the date is Boom Time Confusion 26, year of Our Lady of Discord, 3179. So, it depends on what calendar you're using. And lo and behold, although this Gregorian calendar that we all play with is pretty much an internationally accepted thing, and most people do exist in a time zone in 2013 somewhere, not everybody figures out significant things in their life according to that calendar. Sometimes, you know, if you're Jewish, you use number 2 up here. If you're a Muslim, you use number 1. If you're a Discordian, well, you've got maybe stuff to think about. Okay? Oh, please, Discordians, do not send me hate mail. But there are a number of calendars, and Chinese calendar is another one. That one was, if you ever have some time and you're really bored, go Google, you know, calendars and see how many there are, and then see what different, because we assume that things have days and weeks and months in them, but not everybody is cut from the same cloth, as they say. I got an interesting one for you. Everybody studied the alphabet in school somewhere? Are these names in alphabetical order? There are 2 choices, yes or no, I think. Perhaps, yeah. It's even worse than perhaps. In Denmark, they're in order. In Germany, if you looked in the phone book, they might not be in order, and if you looked in the dictionary, they might be in order. Umlauts are not necessarily benign. So, what do you do when this person goes to your website and you ask them for first name and last name, and they put in their name with umlauts or a dot or an accent or some of that other stuff? How do you handle it? Is your software international and you just didn't even know it yet? Interesting question. Another fun one. Is this map legal? Well, Douglas, I never thought I'd be asked whether a map was legal or not today, so I didn't study up. But anybody ever do any work with this US government thing? I hear they've got money. Right? Not much, and it's mine. All right, but I mean, somebody give me a guess. Yes or no, is it legal?
No.
No, it's not legal. It's not legal in Pakistan because, because Kashmir as a part of India, if you show a map that has Kashmir as a part of India in Pakistan, that is illegal because these two countries and China have been saying, hey, it's ours. No, it's ours. Border dispute going on for the last 60-something odd years, I guess, or so, since the British said, hey, we're going to cut you up into little pieces. This is the way we do it, right? But the question is, when you have to deal with your software, issues like this pop up all the time. And the question is, do you even know to handle that as an issue? And talking about internationalization hopefully opens your eyes to look for some of this stuff, because most of this stuff I think is very, very subtle. Welcome to the Anglosphere. It was an album by Public Enemy. I think it's about 1980. Am I losing some people here? Public Enemy? I'm sorry, Flava Flav is on like some show on VH1, so you got to go back and revisit the whole catalog at that point. You see the dark blues? What language do those people speak? English. Yes, like us. Everybody speaks American. But that's good. How many people do you think are there? Rough guess. It's about 416 as of my count yesterday, but what do I know? How many on the whole big knot here? 7.1. Yeah, they got, the Census Bureau has a little clock, so I had to check all this stuff yesterday, right? 7.1 billion. 400 million is not a lot, relatively speaking, is it? So, for fun, let's throw in the light blue. And one of the fun things in the light blue is India, right? So we get 1.2 billion just like that. Our numbers get staggeringly large. It seems like a lot of people speak English. But have you ever sat and talked with people from India? People from India have a different version of English than Americans, right? Actually, people from New Jersey have a different version of English from Americans. Whatever. I worked for Digital, the Boston people, Lord. But the point being, since we have all these different versions of English, there's not necessarily American culture. The thing that is behind and kind of permeates your software isn't everywhere. So there may be an opportunity here if we internationalize. Let's get definitional. Internationalization is the process of designing a software application so it can be adapted to various languages, regional or cultural context, and government constraints without requiring that we have engineering changes. So we get this little thing here, and we can move it all over the globe, but we don't have to change the hard stuff that we pay the programmers in the backyard, or back office, excuse me, same thing, to do, right? We want to make it so that there's the software itself contains all the fundamentals, and the stuff that changes, those resources that change from region to region, get taken out. Those things get changed with the process of localization, which is adapting software that's been internationalized for a specific region or a language, or adding locale-specific resources without altering the original functionality of the software. So, anybody here use a Mac? They're new. I don't know if you've heard of them. How many different languages are on your computer? You ever check? I checked last night. I had 41. All right? So we've covered the world, right? Maybe not. This one was the thing that got me. How many different versions of English are on your Mac? I had 19. Okay? Who knew? There are people out there not speaking American and they haven't told me. Right? So, what we have is we have people who not only don't speak the same words, you know, if you're going to go out and smoke a fag, it has a different meaning if you're on the other side of the pond, doesn't it? Are you with me? You all are fag smokers. Anyway, it's true. That one always gets me because it was like one of those things where the English student comes to meet the American parents and they're sitting there and after dinner he wants to go out and smoke a fag and the whole family just sets on fire, right? But not only that, all those places where we do our same language, we don't do our numbers the same way. We don't do our time the same way. Stuff like that. This is some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a little bit. One of the things I want to talk to you about, this internationalization. Do you guys know the abbreviation for this? I-18N. Why is it I-18N? Have any clue? 18 letters? Internationalization is too long to say. And localization is L10N. Now, here's the story. Again, I worked at Digital Equipment Corporation. The rumor is that this started at Digital Equipment Corporation because there was a guy, and his name was, and my wife is Dutch, so I should say this perfectly, right? Jan Scherpenhausen. And that's also a mouthful, and it was too long for an email address back at DEC in 1985. So they gave him the address Jan S12N. And I remember this. When I came, my God, you know, it's like you take your name, you scrunch it all up. It was beautiful. But that's how internationalization got to be the word that it is. Again, it's taking the function and continuing to function regardless of the context. No matter what color the universe is out there, the structure of the image stays the same. Aren't you glad computers have cameras on them? Okay. Now, let's think about where we would start if we're going to do process of internationalization. And I divide that up into two places. Making sure there's actually a market for you to approach. And then once you figure that out, you've got to have some kind of valid strategy or tactics or understanding of what you got to do to make this happen, because we'll talk about it. Now, here's the business case for internationalization. See the green? Right? We're okay with colors. Good. We figured out there's 7.1 on this little knot here. And in the green, according to the census yesterday, there was 316 million of us. Do you know that the most popular age for men is 51 and 25, I think. Stuff. But that's like 6% of the world's population. 5-ish, 6-ish, let's be generous about it. That means 95% of the world's population is still out there in a market yet to be conquered, right? So, if you're going to sell your software, you've got to look at the available market. You've got to say, if we move this software to a different language, to a different locale, will we be able to make money with it? If you have software and you move to England, can you make money with that software being sold in Britain? Can you make money if you sell your software in the rest of Europe? I make software for Macs. I have not internationalized my products. It's not worth it for me because I'm not selling a whole lot of copies of software in Italy. That's just, if I internationalize my software, I might spend several weeks getting that done. Would I reap the benefits in Italy? I've made the decision that that's probably not going to happen right now. However, if you're, let's see, what's in this town that could possibly work in other countries? Banks, let's go with that. You're a bank, all right? They have banks in other countries. We might need to take some of that software and move it so that when you're in Switzerland, you can check your balance, right? And you want to see it the way you want to see it. So these are some of the things that you consider. If you take a look at internationalization, some people will say it's hard, some people will say it's easy, depending on what they're trying to sell you. My cut is it's neither. but it does have a cost associated with it. And you've got to have a firm handle on that before you decide to go down this road and say, I'm going to make my software internationalizable. Because you got to be able to basically recover your investment, and there will be some investment. When you decide to design your software, there are lots of things you have to consider. This is not an inclusive list, but these are the things I'm going to talk about. When I talk about architectural the architectural attributes of internationalized software, what I'm saying is, do you have an eye on the long term for what your software is going to be? Oh, I depend on a time server, right? The one in Colorado. All right, now so we move to some other country and they block access to that server in Colorado. Do we have issues? Do we have a fallback? Are these things that we thought about in the long term? How does your software evolve? Is it okay when we put our software out to say, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Europe with the countries that have mostly the same letters as us, right? Then we'll go to the eastern part of Europe where they have slightly different letters and I can recognize most of them. To China, are we going to go do all the countries in the east all at one time? What's your strategy for doing this? And this may be determined by how difficult it is. When you internationalize your software, your data is never the same after that. And we'll talk about some of the ways that it's very, very different after you approach internationalization. I've got a note up here for tools, and I make no recommendation on any tools. Everybody has tools to do something in this direction. It depends on the platform you're on. Learn those tools, understand what they're all about. One of the things that's at the base of most of those tools is the fact that languages and locales have been internationalized in the sense that, or standardized, excuse me, in the sense that I can count on EN as being English if I ask my system for a language all around the world. I can count on US as being a locale if I ask for that locale all around the world, if the system is compliant. So, it'd be great if I said, here's a tool, just run your stuff through it, and out the other side comes internationalized software. Unfortunately, that is not something that happens right now. The tool that does that is in here. And in the end, test, 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 because people have approached this internationalization thing and they've been mostly successful, but there are some lovely high-profile failures. And if you'd like to be one of them, then skip the last step. That is my note to you. Now let's talk about data a little bit, because there is this impact on your data when you internationalize software. All right. When you type in letters now in America, right? How much space does that take up? How much does a single character take up in general? A byte, right? Now, you guys know about this Unicode thing? Unicode can encode almost all the glyphs in all of the languages all over the world. How many bytes does a Unicode character take up? I hear 2. Do I hear any other numbers? I got 16. I got anything else? We don't have enough to win the Powerball yet, so go on. Unicode is fun. Unicode has multiple encodings, and you can get 1 byte, 2 bytes, or 4 bytes. And they all can coexist. That's even lovelier. So you've got that code that searches through a string, don't you? And it does +1 on the index. That doesn't get you to the next character sometimes if you're searching Unicode. Okay? Something to be aware of. But even if we did just do a Unicode encoding that was 2 bytes long, what does that do to our data if we've been normally using just 1 byte? 1 terabyte is now 2 terabytes, right? And if you've got really big data, somebody's buying another drive for you. So it's something to consider because it does have an impact. When we're downloading, okay, that file is now twice as big. Something to be aware of. We did the alphabet a little bit earlier. Is this in alphabetical order? I guess it is. It actually is in America. But the question is if I'm presenting my data in Sweden, what do I want to be aware of in terms of that data? They may have a different collating sequence than I have here. And that may be different from another locale and another locale. So you've got to be aware of those things. And right now, mostly we just grab that array and we splash it on the screen because, man, that's fun and easy, right? You can hook it up, doesn't even require any programming. But that may not be the case if it's locale-dependent data. All right, this one's even more fun. Anybody in here good at Hebrew? Pulling out a big fat egg on that one. But you basically know this whole Hebrew thing is right to left, correct? So, where's the first character in this string? Top right? Bottom right? Top right. Just happens to be in this particular case. But look at this fun thing. We've got things in here that are normal left to right. So when you search the string, how do you do that? I'm going this way, but I got to go that way. When you store that string, where do those things end up? Do they end up nice? It used to be an array of characters out there, right? This becomes a consideration because you may be able to mitigate this problem if you consider it a problem. But this doesn't happen when everybody speaks American. Here's a fun one. It weirded me out. This is the Unicode standard in Hebrew. What's funny about the selection up there? Or is there anything funny about the selection? It's right to left. You know what? People could spend a long time grabbing on the left trying to go to the right and select. I know, all right? And it was like, what is wrong here? Something is not quite right. What do your users expect? These are the things that you've got to take take consideration for in your software. Because if you don't, what you're going to have is a poor user experience. You're going to have a bowl of cereal, you're going to have a milk, no spoon. Okay? That's not what you want to have happen. Boop, boop, boop. You're used to reading left to right, right? So what that means is you take the dirty shirt, you put it in the washing machine with the detergent, you get a clean shirt. You're used to reading right to left. What that means is you take a clean shirt, you put it in the machine with the detergent, you get a dirty shirt. It's simple, isn't it? And it's like, oh, but how could we possibly not get that right? They're they're left to right. But that's not what everybody's used to looking at. And that has to be one, how many people in here have ever made a media app that plays, music or video or something of that nature, right? You got the little buttons down there. There's the rewind, the play, or maybe the rewind, frame back, frame forward. First goes all the way to the beginning, right? Frame back, frame forward, all the way to the end. They're the little arrows. When you're reading them left or right, what happens when you do that the other way? It only becomes confusing to people who don't know the right way to do it. Is that the way we? Is that the way we look at it? I think. Let me ask you another question. How many hours are in a day? Yeah, I know. It's insanely funny. How many hours are in a day? You guys should know this. Yeah, 23.8 something. It's 23 hours, 56 minutes, I think like 4 seconds or something. But that's not the correct answer either. Anybody got a guess? How many times have you wrote that code that says 24 times 60 times 60 to get the number of seconds in a day? You've all done it, right? Tell me when that code breaks. It breaks twice a year. Daylight savings time. In America, and in North Carolina at least, not someplace, well, they don't do it in Illinois anymore, but they used to. What you get is you have 364 days that are 24 hours long, roughly. One day that's 23 hours long and one day that's 25 hours long. And sometimes you get a day that's 24 hours and 1 second. How many people have got their calendars working fine for when you go overseas? Maybe not, because do you have daylight savings time everywhere? And there's one time zone that's like a half an hour off. And don't you want to go smack the person that did that? It's in the South Pacific somewhere, but it's like, okay, whatever. But, you know, basically they localized their time, and you know how they did the time zone lines like this? Basically they said, it's too far west. So they said it's a half an hour off. Odd. But that whole notion of time and calendars becomes crucial because people live by time, in essence. And the formatting of time becomes something that's a serious consideration. This falls out again with numbers. All right? In America, we do commas, the way that God intended for us to write. You know that it's true. You know that you're really, really rich when you're a 2-comma dude, don't you? Okay? But my brothers and sisters in Germany use the little dot things, right? And I had a Swiss visitor at my house for about 3 weeks, and I didn't know this. They use apostrophes. What's up with that? Good thing there's only 7 million of them. The French use nothing. Didn't know that either. And then it's like, well, you can't use a space because then my string is all broken up and I don't know if I'll be able to put it back together. In India, this was funky to me. The first 3 get grouped together, then it's by 2s. I'm like, but what about thousands? No, it's by 2. And then in Japan, here's an internationalization failure. I cut and pasted this. There are characters there, you just can't see them, okay? But they group numbers in 4s. What's up with that, okay? All of these different things are, what happens is, I'm displaying this data for you. Do you understand it? You might not understand it. Do you know how many millions of dollars were really not millions of dollars because somebody put a comma in when they should have put a dot? If you do that mistake, you will not be the first, right? It happens all the time. And so you have to be aware of how you're going to display the data, and even more fun, how you get it when you put it in. When you go to Fidelity and you get some money out of your account, and you put it in, how do you put it in? Do you put in separators or not? Do you put in, $5,000? Is it 5,000? Do you put in a .00 at the end for? If you ask for a date and somebody puts in tomorrow, does your software handle it? Come on, that one's an easy one. No. If you type in 5, the word, does your software handle it and turn that into the number 5? It gets to be real fun when you actually start allowing people to put in their dates and put in their numbers. Because what has to happen is your software has to convert that to something that's neutral. Now, there's goodness there because almost a large portion of those core routines in your operating system handle 99% of this stuff for you. But you've got to make sure you use the right calls, okay? So you can get away from having to, make sure so much. Now, you've got to test around the border cases. It's great. We're just going to Europe. That's it. We're going to go to Europe. We know mostly what they're doing there. And, people from India with the 2 together, not dealing with that, right? But this comes back to your thinking about how you want this thing to evolve in the long term. These are going to be problems that you run into. And for the most part, these aren't things that you run into, but I can't tell you which ones you're going to run into. Some happen, some don't. When you translate your software, beware of the person that says, oh, I'm internationalizing your software, all I've got to do is translate the strings, because they've missed most of the point, okay? When you are moving from one language to another, get professional help. That is my only comment. Because sometimes an engineer has, do we have a year of Spanish there, Greg?
1 year.
1 year. This man would be a total failure, perhaps, if he tried to translate his software if he wasn't fluent in the language. And he didn't know that perhaps, does Spanish have gender on the nouns?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens when you've written your little sentence and one of the things that you can substitute at the end is male and the other one is a female gender? Will it be correctly read at the other end of the line? This happens in French all the time. This is the one I know, right? You've got to worry about when you get that translation done, have I just broken this up into pieces of a string where I've substituted stuff in, but I haven't created the proper grammar? I don't have gender that matches. I have a string that instead of, this is my cheesy expression. Ik hou van jou is I love you in Dutch. But that's 4 words. In English or American, we only have 3 words, I love you. But what happens when you take bigger phrases than that, and instead of 5 words, you come out with some long sentence? I mean, you guys have gone to the movies where you have to read, and the character's blathering on in some language, and underneath it says, yes. Right? He told her. That is an approximate translation, right? But when you're doing your software, you got to be aware of that, because what may happen is, the annoying thing is, you've got some text at the top of the screen that kind of gives users instruction. You got 3 lines for that text in English, and it takes 6 lines in fill in the blank other language. German. Oh, yes. And so what happens is we're talking about their language, right? Okay, good. Man. All of a sudden, I was having a little bit of a fear moment there for certain Germans. But anyway. Please, no one write me from Germany. But what you've got is you've got to prepare for these things. That is a part of the long-term view of how do you make international software? Because if you don't, stuff happens, I think is the phrase we use here in America. Now, let's take a look at some cultural things. And those are things that, it's just like, oh, I never thought about that. You've got to be kidding me, or whatever. When you have data that you have to display, or, there's some part of your user interface, there may be issues on the other end when you have to sort things or search through them. You have to cut and paste from one place to another. We already saw my cut and paste failure up here with the little ideographs that were in Japanese, or manipulate it. So let's take a look and see what we got here. What's in a name? See, there's my name, nice and American and short. I'm not even going to try and butcher that one, but that's an Indian politician, whatever, and it was like, okay, I've got first name, middle name, last name on the screen, and I've only allowed for it to be about 20 characters wide, right? Maybe not. Here's an Arabic name, and there's a pattern to how that name is constructed. And so when that person wants to put their full name in, it may not fit in 20 characters on the screen. Similarly, this Brazilian name, and I just found out in Brazil, basically you get to tag on as many ancestors' names as you like. So that's why they have all of the different names there. And then things get real interesting. This is a famous Chinese politician down here at the bottom. Anybody want to take a guess at that one? Mao Zedong. But it looks like only one string. It's 3 names. What do we do? Names get real interesting, and people, again, when you're building your software for the world, not everybody's first name, last name, first name, middle initial, last name with like junior on the end, possibly. You've got to be aware of those things. Other stuff that you got to be aware of. Everybody knows that phone numbers are 10 digits long, aren't they? Except in Poland, where they're 9. Or in Argentina, where they're 11. Or in France, where they do 10, but they put little spaces between every 2. Or China, where they have 12. I have no earthly idea how many numbers are in this Arabic number. It was like, phone numbers in Arabic, and I found it, and it was like, oh, here's the number, and then they put the little glyph over there, and it's like, oh my, right? But these are things that commonly get displayed. If you want somebody to call you back, if they need a contact for you or something of that nature, you've got to put that in. And how are people expecting to enter it, and how are you expected to display it? Again, we can do the American thing pretty good, all right? But if your software is going to be in some other part of the country, how do we deal with it? And not only do we have to deal with that with phone numbers, but addresses, right? Anybody ever sent a letter to another country? I'm talking a physical letter, not email. Come on. Okay. Try it. What I invite you to do, Francois Hollande, he's the president of France, right? Send him a letter. They have a different address format. Just send him a letter. Tell him Douglas said send you a letter. Let's see how this works out for you, okay? See if you can properly address it. Other things. You know what? They don't have Social Security numbers all around the world. It's odd, but what happens when you have to get that government ID? And Social Security numbers have all these little rules and stuff about it. It's not a real ID, and you can't put the dashes in, all that stuff. Are there the same regulations with other government IDs in other parts of the world? These are things you may have to consider if your software requires stuff of that nature. I mean, you guys all know, how many ounces are in a pound? I heard 16. 16. Except, I didn't know there were that many different kinds of pounds, but go Google pound UK, and there are like 5 different kinds of pound in terms of weight. And you probably know like the troy ounce for a troy pound, which they talk about with gold. They're only 12. But there's one that's like 15 and 5/8. And I'm like, what's up with that, dude? All right? But weights and measures. It's not just go metric or, once you go metric, you never go back, or whatever that statement is. I don't know. These are things that you will have to consider when you go international. Somebody wants your shoe size. I have a Bigfoot. It's a 48 in Northern Europe, right? That sort of stuff. Things you will have to consider. And again, you will get to this point because you have said, we want to make an international piece of software because it will benefit us. There will be the return on the money that we invest. Okay? If you're not going to get a return on it, you will never see this as an issue. Now, there are other things that are international. Money. All right, you want to make sure you put up the right symbol. Which one of these is the pound symbol? I've got one for this and one for this. Top right? You, my sir, will not go to the head of the class because this is the lira. This is money that doesn't even exist anymore. However, you would not be the first person that may have gotten those two a little bit not quite the right way. What about this one? Anybody know what this one is? Yen? Everybody with me on the yen? What makes this different from the yuan, the China currency? Or would you even know? And that's the point. If you're internationalizing software and you throw up the yuan when it's really a yen, and you know the difference between the prices there, oh, it gets silly. The yuan has only one dash on it. But what are your customers, what are your users expecting? Think outside of, well, we just have to put a $sign in front of it and everything is okay. That's not the case. Let me ask you a few questions. Since you all are currency nuts, and this is obviously a currency trading center, I said I had this guest from Switzerland. They're right in the heart of Europe. What money do they use? No, they use the Swiss franc, right? That's good. Now, Norway, they're in the EU. What money do they use? Fail. Krona. I'm being mean now. Wow. And this one is always interesting to me because, again, my wife wants to go to Aruba, Bonaire, or Curacao because I think everyone in the Netherlands wants to go there because it's sunny. Bonaire is a part of the Netherlands. What money do they use? The Netherlands is a part of the EU, and they have the euro there. I'm just giving you a hint. No, one of the islands down there does still use guilders. They actually use the florin, but they're the same. Bonaire uses the US dollar. Whatever. I'm not in charge of their country. If I was, you know I'd fix everything, right? So, I've done this project. It's beautiful. It's extra special. I have to print out my results. And how big is that sheet of paper? Remember, these are cultural things. Do you know how big that isn't? Doesn't everybody print on legal paper or letter paper? If you ever look up the history of letter and legal, it's just odd. I'll just give it to you that way. There's an ISO standard, and we know that everything that ISO says is right. This is an A0 sheet of paper. It's roughly 46 inches by 33 inches, with a little bit. But the cool thing about this type of paper is that you fold it in half, and you get the next size down. So you take an A0 sheet, you fold it in half, you get two A1 sheets. Take an A1 sheet, you fold it in half, you get two A2 sheets. And on down. A4 is close to letter size. It's 11.7 by 8.3, but it's still bigger. So you were printing out those statements, and all of a sudden there's all this extra space at the bottom, or it's not centered. It doesn't look pretty like the person in marketing wants it to look. These are considerations, and it's one of those that you might not even think about until the very end of the project when you finally do have to print something out.
Like checks.
Like checks. Yeah. You know, do they come on the standard spool of whatever? And things to be aware of. Now, this one's fun to me. Color is not perceived the same all over the world. It is perceived very differently in different parts of the world. Here in America, we think green, well, some people think green is great, right? We have this whole green movement making the world safe for tomorrow and all that sort of stuff, right? In South America, in countries where there's a large jungle, what emotion do you think they associate with green? Death. So this whole green movement we have here in America, how do you think that's perceived there? The color green doesn't go across quite as well, do you think? You know, red is the color of good luck in China, right? But here in America, what do we do when we see red? We stop. You know, it's a color of mourning in the Ivory Coast. Who knew? Purple, what association do you have with purple? Royalty. It's color of mourning in Brazil. Okay? In Japan, they think green is high tech. I could kind of go with that. Green is a forbidden color in Indonesia. So, remember, do you guys remember this bank called First Union? It was here a long time ago, and then some stuff happened. But their color scheme was all green. It was green and white. So I'm thinking that went over well in Indonesia. Maybe, maybe not. You know, lots of other things. Brown is a color of disapproval in Nicaragua. The point being is I could go through this list, and there are tons of lists out there, and there's even an infographic that does, it's like 50 different attributes, and I pointed to it in the link that's with this presentation. Different colors are perceived differently all over the world. And the point is if you're making your user interface, and Bob from marketing comes in and gives you this list of colors that need to be on it, you know, things need to be done this way, and you realize that one of your customers is not perhaps going to perceive it well, that's something that you need to consider, okay? And again, there's no right or wrong with that, but you just need to be aware of it. I can't make it work or not work for you. Images are different and perceived differently in other parts of the world. For instance, Borat in a mankini. This is obviously the international sign for having a good time on the beach. In Sicily, it means go to hell. All right, because this whole thumbs up symbol is not perceived well there. All right, we all know what is the shape for a stop sign? It's an octagon. It's basically 8 sides, or kind of round in other parts of Mexico. It's round. Somebody made some software. They ship it off to Japan. The Japanese are having a problem with the stop sign symbol that they've used on their user interface. And the reason they are is because traffic signs for stopping in Japan are triangular. Who knew? The person that did their internationalization homework up front, right? These are the kinds of things that will get you as you go through this whole process. Now, this one's a good one, audio. I'll start by telling you a story. Anybody remember Lotus 123? They made some money once upon a time. Lotus was incredibly popular here. They ship it off to Japan. Not so much. And the reason why is because if you remember Lotus 123, when you typed in, if you put a correct formula in a spreadsheet, it did nothing. But if you put an incorrect formula in a spreadsheet, it would go beep. Innocuous. It didn't hurt you. You didn't drop dead. There was nothing wrong with this, right? Except in Japan, where they noticed that people wouldn't use it because when the beep was heard in the office, it was a signal that you, the user, had made a mistake. So in essence, all of those beeps were telling all of my coworkers I made a mistake. And everyone in Japan is perfect. This is what the moral of the story is. Please, people in Japan, do not write me hate mail. But the point being, that audio, which I'm sure some engineers said, oh, this is great. It's, they probably called it the attention bell or something like that. It did what it was supposed to do. It got your attention. It signaled something was incorrect. But how that is perceived in the culture is another animal, and it's something to be aware of because your software will get ill-received, if that is actually a word. Another one, I have Siri up here because you just talk to it. It doesn't have a text interface. You've got to actually just speak. And the software understands your speech and goes to the next step. How do you do that if you're building something that only has an audio-only interface? How do you deal with that? Anybody ever written or done one of those systems where you call in and my phone stopped working last week. I have no earthly idea why, right? It's a landline. So I called Bell South, AT&T, and I did not talk to a person, but I was asked questions incessantly by until I got to the end and they said, somebody will come out and fix your phone. How many of you have ever worked on one of those systems? It makes for an interesting life. Back in the early 90s, remember there was a company called AT&T once, and it was big. And, as would be, the government said, hey, big is bad, and we will break you up into lots of little pieces, and you will never reform again in your entire life. And so they broke AT&T up into lots of companies. And one of them in the Northeast, I know this because it's a digital era story, wanted to have the phone system that you could just call and talk to. The problem they had was the phone system couldn't understand the accent for people in New England. Okay? Now, I'm just saying, it may be 10 years before we run into this, or you run into it, but somebody's out there running into it right now because alternatives to a text-only interface exist and will continue to exist, and I think will be more as we continue to go on. One last slide, kind of. Here's another picture again, but this picture has some issues with it. And does anybody know why this picture has issues? It may be small, but any clues? It's similar to the India thing. The answer's on there. This is the Malvinas. These are the Malvinas. All right? But they're not the Malvinas. People in Argentina call them the Malvinas, but people in England call them the Falkland Islands, which they went to around Australia and kicked a little Australian ass for, 30 years ago or so. And so, is this the one that's correct to be displayed? Would you? Could you? These were things were asked by Dr. Seuss. I don't know. But what I want to say is all those issues with who owns what, if you ever look up border disputes, who knew that there was a border dispute between the U.S. and Mexico? It's like, you got to be kidding me. Can't you guys go down and get some scuba gear? Just work this thing out. Get some ink. Stick it in the water there. Anyway, those are some issues that are cultural. That's my talk on internationalization. You know, hopefully you guys have a clue about the definition, a little bit of history. These items that I brought up are things that will come up in some internationalization cases, and some of them they won't. There's nothing that says you have to go all the way to 11 to be internationalized. You can be at whatever level is appropriate for you. If it's just making sure that the time and the date is correct, that may be all that you can do at any particular time. I don't think that any internationalization story is one and done. It's always an evolutionary process. So, anybody got any questions or comments or hints or threats or stuff?
Don't forget to check the name of your app.
Don't forget to check the name of your app. That is true. Have you got an example of one that failed?
No, I always just think of the car when they try to sell a Nova in Mexico. No one would buy it.
That's true. You know, that whole naming thing, you guys are, you're familiar with the water pick? It's like a dental hygiene thing. Do you know what the word for penis is in Danish? Pick. Do you know what the translation for water is? Vond. So the product kind of got known as Vond Pick. This is that situation that men know in the morning when you first wake up. And so it was the, water pick didn't quite go across as they thought. I'm just saying. So, you know, it's like, how can I tell this story without saying anything right? You know what I'm saying, people. If you don't, well, too bad. But, yes, be careful of the name of your product.